What up everyone, it's Q from Retro Q Gaming, and this time we're going to have a retrospective for one of the most important, influential and definitely best games of all time, Shenmue. So first off, I just want to quickly clarify something about this little video. As you saw in the thumbnail, that while I do own Shenmue 1 on the Dreamcast and Shenmue 2 on both Dreamcast and original Xbox, I did not record this footage. This footage came from the bonus DVD that comes with Shenmue 2 on the Xbox, called Shenmue the Movie. Now, Shenmue the Movie was pretty much all the main major plot points and plot cutscenes of the story and some gameplay to fill in the gaps and set it up between them. They were all cut into one feature-length movie, and it was released in Japanese theaters as well as packaged with the Xbox version of Shenmue 2 to fill in for, say, new players who haven't played the previous story, since they wouldn't know what was going on in the first one when they tried to play the second one. Now that all that's out of the way, we move on to looking at different aspects of the game, all individually, trying to keep spoilers to the minimum, but chances are, if you've already enjoyed Shenmue before seeing this, if you haven't, then I command you to go play it right now. So, what is Shenmue? Well, Shenmue is a game for Sega Dreamcast that released in 1999 in Japan and in late 2000 for North America and Europe. It features some pretty new and pretty interesting and innovative systems, gameplay mechanics and styles of gameplay, styles of narrative that have become very popular and widespread in modern gaming since the release. It's also pretty much a genre simply of its own, because it mixes so many different types and styles of both gameplay and story narratives all into one. Shenmue was the most expensive video game produced at its time, this being 1999-2000, reporting to have costed anywhere between $47 million and $70 million, and those were 1990s dollars, so that's even more expensive, by today's standards at least anyway. It's been critically acclaimed since the time of release all the way up to 2015. There's never a time when it hasn't been highly praised, and it's been making its way onto best games of all times lists ever since it was released. The game came on 3 discs, or GD-ROMs as the Dreamcast used. They were basically just slightly higher capacity, differently compressed CDs, but they essentially worked the same. And as well, it also contained a 4th disc, which was known as a passport disc. The passport was more like an interactive digital manual, really. It came with many tutorials on how to play the game, on how to get used to the various mechanics spread throughout the game, such as, say, movement, combat, and the like, etc. They were almost all voiced by in-game characters while in character as well, so that was a nice touch. But what made these tutorials really different from any others in any other game was the ability for the player to actually take control and move the camera or character at almost any time, which it was really interactive because of that. The passport also had an online feature, and when you took it online, it let you access a huge amount of data and lore for the game, and not just the game, but the setting and the universe it was set in. So from stuff like character bios to location history, say, of the town, things like that, and more. It would also allow you to view the cutscenes you'd experience in the game. It would take where you are from your save file, and you could watch any of the cutscenes that you'd experienced thus far, as well as access pretty much all, well, not all, but the majority of the game's soundtrack that was included anyway. Shenmue was originally written as an 11-chapter saga, Shenmue 1 being the first chapter. 5 chapters have been released to this day across 2 games, as well as a short-run manga as well. But sadly, because only 5 chapters have been released of the 11-chapter series, and that leaves huge Shenmue fans like myself with a completely unresolved cliffhanger since 2001. So in this section, we're going to look at the setting and the story. Now, Shenmue does a great job at weaving an amazing tale after a traumatic event in a young man's life, and the search for answers as well as the emotional effects on him, his family, and his friends. Now, using a mixture of Japanese culture, Chinese culture, mythology, realism, and authenticity, Shenmue manages to be a complete, fully immersive game. it really makes the player feel like they're taking part and being in the world and the events that are taking place. So the game starts on November 29th, 1986 in, I'll probably butcher the pronunciation on this, but I'm sorry, Yokosuka, Japan, whichever it is, I'm sorry. Use many in-game mechanics that I'll go into later in the separate mechanics section, combined with the style, the atmosphere, the mood, the characters, the soundtrack, the visuals at the time. It really feels like an accurate depiction of, say, 1986 when it's set. Now, if you were to play it now as in like nowadays, for the first time, you'd probably be puzzled by the voice acting. But this was, 1999, 2000. PlayStation 2 generation era voice acting, so it was pretty well done for the time, at least. Or lived well back then. So, but don't let that take away. I don't want to take anything away from an amazing experience. Even in standard def, Shenmue manages to still be one of the greatest adventure games of all time. The in-game environments all look great, even to this day, even despite the lack of the low resolution. But they really help sell the feel of the location and the time period. I mean, sure, by 2015 standards, the resolution might be low and there might be no anti-aliasing or extra effects or anything. But even when it was released, Shenmue was praised for some of the highest and the best graphics and facial animations ever seen in a game. Lan Di, who's a character in Shenmue, he's a perfect example of this because his outfit is extremely detailed for what was even a relatively low resolution at the time, and he's still one of the best looking faces of characters in gaming in general. Now, I just wish the original concept for Lan Di had made it into the game, really, because they were going to give him a lion's mane style hairdo, with tons of everything was going to be an individual hair, but proved too much for the programming and design and the hardware limitations of the Dreamcast at the time. But that goes into the soundtrack as well, because we've looked at the setting, the style, and the graphics essentially at the moment. So the soundtrack is completely, it's perfectly well rounded for an 80s style soundtrack. It has all the mellow tracks, the daily feel tracks, the lifestyle tracks, the action, the danger, the suspense. It's got lighthearted tracks for those moments whenever they come up. It's got cool jazz. It's all there. It has it all, and it's all pretty historically accurate for the time as well. This definitely helps the immersion because not only is the music absolutely amazing, but the music that is designed to be everyday background music kind of just feels exactly like that. It's not overly obnoxious, it's not completely in your face, it always has the right music for the right scene, the right mood, and the proper tone is always playing just when you need it. So, Shenmue uses many different gameplay mechanics, some of which it brought to mainstream use, some of which were copied in gaming ever since. Some of them were used for just, say, certain mini-games, some were persistent over the entire game, and some only during certain cutscene or events. Now this time, in this section, we'll go into detail on each one individually. So first up is dynamic weather. Shenmue uses a dynamic weather system to change the weather based on the previous weather changes and patterns. It would never be set in stone, so each time you play the game it would be different, and it gave a much more real feel to the world. Although after you did finish the game the first time, there is a setting that unlocks that it actually allows you to use the real weather data for the area from November, December in 1986, which was a nice touch. So next up is the passage of time mechanic. Now Shenmue has two passage of time systems in the game. The first one passes minutes and hours in game, like in a regular day. Now it doesn't pass it in real world time. For example, like 5 in-game minutes is not 5 real life minutes. But overall, this has a major effect on the game, since some different places, different people, different situations and the like are all only available at certain times of day. For example, some stores are only open at certain times of the day, some street vendors only set up and close shop at certain times of the day, and NPCs related to them and who may have other schedules will stop appearing until the next day or the next day that their schedule is free for it. Now, in the evening the stores close up and some bars and other places that only open at night become available for, say, side quests, story progression, or other random things. The second system is a day of the week system. This one is mainly used for different stores being open on different days. For example, stores don't just serve to buy new things. They also have NPCs that can give you info on clues for the main story. They can give you hints for new side quests, help you acquire new items, new fighting moves, the things like that. This works for other NPCs too, because other ones have schedules that will put them in game on certain times and certain days that wouldn't be related to a shop, but they may be related to, say, school or something like that. Now, another style of gameplay mechanics that Shenmue introduced as well was it included a bunch of little gameplay touches that make you feel more and more as a part of the game and a part of the world instead of just playing the game. So they really worked on an immersion level. This varies from stuff like, say, buying drinks and snacks in vending machines, or one that really got me and spent a lot of my time and money on in game was collecting figures from little gacha machines. But like I said, be warned, the gacha machines can get pretty addictive pretty quickly. But there's a few instances of, say, driving mechanics used in daily routine, as well as a few individual instance ones that are all handled separately. Now, these handled pretty well and not as clunky as you might expect from a 1999-2000 game. And I won't spoil it for you, but the mini game isn't bad and it's pretty fun too. So next up is the big one, Cuties, otherwise known as quick timer events. Not quick time events like most people and newer games improperly call them. Now, you'll be watching footage and scenes of QTs right now during this little section, but the button presses won't show up in this footage because that's just the way that it was presented in the movie footage. But Shenmue is credited with the invention and inspiration of QTs in modern games. But what's so great about the QTs in Shenmue is that they aren't all just press X to not die, like every damn fucking generic game that uses them these days. But the great thing about them is that even if you fail a single button press or a sequence of button presses, the QTE will change in motion, and sometimes even the cutscene after the QTE or even the story itself will change around what actually happened based on your ability to complete the QTE. Now they tend to start out pretty easy, and as the game progresses and your skill and your reaction times improve, the button press windows get smaller and the input commands tend to get more complex. The buttons are shown on screen during the scene, sometimes during actions so that you have to be ready for them at a moment's notice. They'll show up usually on screen based on exactly where the action is happening. But like I already mentioned, the QTE sequence can alter based on the buttons being pressed successful or not. QTs range from lots of different types of scenes in Shenmue. Some are fights, some are story related, some are moving objects, chase scenes, all different types of them, and they're all still the best versions of QTs in any game so far, hands down. So next up we look at the combat system anyway. Shenmue uses a free flow style combat system. It's not quite Arkham City free flow, but remember this game was made 15-ish years ago. It gives you a little 3D arena that you can move around, obviously in 3 dimensions. Shenmue is a great combat system with its movement, fighting, and its skills. Now, obviously you have to keep an eye on your own health meter the entire time while you're trying to land attacks and dodge incoming blows or set up your own skills. But new skills are learned from multiple places during the game. Some skill manuals can be bought in certain stores, some can be learned from completing side quests, some will be through story progression, or what is a nice touch for immersion wise, some can even be learned by being in the right place at the right time. Now you can practice your fighting in your dojo at home with Fukusan, who is a live-in martial arts student of Ryo's father. The combat in Shenmue isn't just one-on-one either. There's several times when you're fighting up against more than one opponent at the same time. Always have to watch your back for openings you might be leaving or blindsided attacks. You always have to keep an eye on what's actually happening all around you, not just with the person you're fighting. And what's really nice as well is that the combat still holds up pretty well, even to these days. So now we're going to take a look at the influence that Shenmue has had on gaming ever since it was released. So Shenmue has pretty much set the standard in adventure games since it was released. Many games nowadays will cite Shenmue as a main influence for either, say, story, narrative, gameplay, adventure, or some sort of aspect of the game. Pretty much all and any adventure game, they try to work in many of the systems, be them small or large, that we've gone over here, to give the world a real fleshed out, immersive feel. Before Shenmue, adventure games were very different, and even ever since Shenmue's release, adventure games have been very different. But this is, of course, all down to what many will agree is thanks to Shenmue. So, this, of course, is nothing but a good thing, with the sheer quality of everything that was in Shenmue and everything it brought to gaming. They say imitation is the sincerest form of flattery, and copying all the great systems and styles that were in Shenmue it usually works out pretty well. Even when nowadays some of them won't actually seem so obvious because it basically changed the entire genre itself after release. So with the game and the narrative being so cinematic, and I use that in the proper tense of the word cinematic, pretty much every game since tries for that cinematic approach, and that's not even counting when they use it as an excuse for low FPS count or low resolution, because the real cinematic approach that Shenmue achieved and it actually pulled off in its storytelling, instead of trying to be a giant blockbuster action movie like everything else just is horribly. On top of all that, we still have the QTE influence. Now, depending on your view, the most copied aspect in the legacy of the game. Most games copy it as a lazy plot device because they use it in the same ways over and over, over and over. To make it worse, almost every game that has used them so far, or well, almost at least, they're just basically press X to not die. There's no proper repercussions. It's all the same thing in every game, or at least almost every game. Sure, there's a few others where, say, I don't know, some will be silly in a funny way. For example, I'm told there's a QTE tutorial near the start of Shadow of Mordor where it teaches you the stealth mechanic of the game, and you have to sneak up and press a button to kiss your wife. I said I haven't seen it myself, but I've heard about it, and it seems kind of silly and quirky, and it's got a bit of good praise. But on the flip side, there's some just beyond stupid or beyond mundane, and I'm looking at you, Call of Duty Advanced Warfare, and your press X to pay respects. But some of them were just so outrageous and so outrageously bad that they spawned their own memes or legacies as well. Press X to Jason from Heavy Rain being one of them. Press E to hide in Mass Grave from Homefront is another, but we'll just kind of leave the meme and legacy section there. But there's also, we'll go into the final section of the bad QTE influence side of it, because while we do want to talk about all the positives that Shenmue brought, it's not Shenmue's fault that some developers just got lazy and made bad choices. So, for example, we'll just quickly mention one or two of those, is that games that use QTEs as last boss, either fight sequences or just last, end of game sequences. Games like Halo 4 and Battlefield 3 perfectly come to mind here, where the final boss sequence, air quotes, is basically just a QTE. Talk about completely being anticlimactic compared to the rest of the story and the rest of the build-up of the entire game and everything that's happening around you right at the end. Well, that's the end of my retrospective of Shenmue, one of the greatest and easily most important games of all time. I highly recommend anyone to play this game at least once in your lifetime, because it's definitely well worth it. And I just want to end this little video, well, this long video, with a quick little story that involves Shenmue, but it was more so in real life. Because back in the day, when Shenmue first released, it was nearly impossible to get Dreamcast games around where I live. Then, one day, a friend of a friend who was visiting out of town, he was visiting my friend from out of town, and he had Shenmue, and since we'd only just met that day for the first time, and we didn't know each other, naturally he didn't want to lend the game to someone he didn't know. He started coming over more regularly after that. It was pretty much every weekend, and a few weeks later he ended up loaning me the first disc for me to play through. So he only came over for the weekends, and I went at disc 1 pretty hardcore, and I finished it in a few days or so. So I was stuck the rest of the week waiting for him to come back over for the next weekend to get disc 2 off him. That was in 2000, maybe early 2001. I'd say it was probably early 2001 actually when it happened. But fast forward 14 years, and it's 2015, and we're still great friends. We play games, talk our usual shit multiple times a week. We go to game and anime conventions. We hit the gym together. It's all that sort of crazy shit. All thanks to, I'm not going to credit something like that specifically to Shenmue, but all thanks to gaming. Good times. So let me know in the comment section below about your experience with Shenmue. If you've always wanted to play it but never got a chance to yet, or the impact you felt it has had on your opinion of games or the gaming culture itself after it. So hit the like button if you did like the video as much as I loved reliving the classic. Hit the subscribe button for more videos on gaming and more retrospectives coming soon. This is Q from Retro Q Gaming. Thanks for watching, and I will see you in the next video on my channel.